My name is Josh Williams. I'm the Director of Insurance Solutions at FS Insurance Brokers, part of the First Service Residential family. I've worked in condo and HOA insurance for over 7 years now. And before that, I spent about 15 years as a property manager. Today, I lead both our water detection program and our direct-to-resident insurance program. I'm joined today by Adam Bartman, Chief Operating Officer at Eddy Solutions. And together, we're going to discuss one of the most common and costly sources of loss in residential communities, water damage. We'll also explore how water detection technology can help identify leaks early, reduce the frequency of claims, and minimize the severity of losses when they do occur.
Yeah, and hello everybody. My name's Adam Bartman, COO at Eddy Solutions, and so I spent the majority of my life and career as a plumber, running a high-rise business in Toronto, Ontario, and about 10 years ago, organically went to the leak detection industry, and 4 years ago joined Eddy. So we'll get into everything Eddy Solutions, but I'll throw it back to Josh to kick us off here.
Thanks, Adam. Before we get into the material, I want to take a minute to tell you a little bit more about my past experience as well, and how I became more involved in helping our associations with water issues. Before I moved over to the insurance side of business, I spent years managing high-rise buildings, just like many of you. During that time, water losses were one of the most frequent and disruptive issues we faced, and some incidents I will never forget. Uh, Many of you can probably relate. It always seemed like something happened around 5 or 6 p.m. on a Friday when I was getting ready to go home and enjoy the weekend. If not then, it was during a holiday or the middle of the night. A supply line would fail on the 14th floor, or a washing machine hose let loose, and now it's raining down through 6 floors below. So we do what we have to do to protect the building and the residents living in it. So I got a lot of experience working with a wet vac. One of the properties I manage eventually installed a leak detection system, like we're going to talk about today, an automatic shutoff system. And I got to see firsthand what a difference it made. There were fewer emergency calls, faster response times when something happened, and we had fewer surprises when leaks were caught very early at the source before they had time to spread and increase damages. So when I talk to you today, I've lived on both sides, the side where you're mopping up the damage and the side where the system catches it before it becomes a major loss. So that's the perspective I'm bringing into today's conversation, and it's why I'm excited about what Adam's going to show you. Uh, so let's put some numbers behind this. My experience is not unique. It's a reality that property managers and board members across our industry encounter every day. A hidden leak behind a wall doesn't announce itself. By the time someone notices a stain up on the ceiling or water on the floor, the damage has often already spread. You know, what was started as a small minor leak has now evolved to damaged floors, drywalls, cabinets, and probably hit multiple units. So it may lead to residents being displaced, contractors mobilized, insurance claims will need to be filed, and everyone involved is left dealing with the disruption, the expense, and the stress that follows that. Take a look at these numbers for a moment. More than half, 53% of all water losses are preventable with leak detection and automatic shutoff technology. Think about that. The majority of the losses we deal with do not have to become major claims. And water isn't a small piece of the problem. Across our portfolio, 57% of all property claims are water related. More than other causes of loss, water continues to drive claims, disruption, repair costs, and frustration for boards, managers, and residents. So Think about the water claims you've dealt with where a small leak went unnoticed for days. Water slowly seeped into the floors, walls, or ceilings, and by the time anyone discovered it, the damage was already extensive. Now imagine if that same leak had been detected the moment it started. Instead of a major restoration project and months of disruption, it may have been as simple as mopping up a small puddle, repairing a leaking pipe, and moving on with your business as usual. Another challenge is that some of the most severe water losses occur when no one's there to respond. Maybe something happens and it's in a vacant unit. Um, Not surprisingly, we see many leaks occur in the middle of the night at 2 a.m. It's a high time for leaks. A holiday weekend, there's more going on. People have visitors over. We see more losses then, or late on a Sunday evening when the maintenance staff might be on site. Those uh, those leaks continue unchecked for hours before anyone realizes there's a problem. And by the time a resident notices water coming through a ceiling or under the door, the damage would have already spread to multiple units. And it's in those stressful moments that many residents, they don't know where the shutoff valve is or who to call or how to get the water cut off quickly. So every minute that passes allows that loss and the cost of it to grow. Uh, One of the risks that every community shares, regardless of its age, size, location, or demographics, is also one of the few risks we have a meaningful opportunity to control. We can't stop a windstorm from moving through or prevent lightning from striking, but we can take steps to detect leaks early, reduce the frequency of water losses, and lessen the impact when they do occur.
Yeah, and Josh, it's interesting. This reminds me of really the defining catalyst for me and the reason I got into the leak detection space and started, building my own technology is again, being that, owner operator plumbing company, the calls I would get are usually at 6 p.m., 2 a.m., when no one's there and you're speaking to a security guard and we're familiar with the building, but it's very chaotic. They're seeing water leaking from a ceiling or a room or wherever it is. And, there's one story in particular where old building, they had the radiators and it started to leak. I think the tenant pulled out one of the bleed valves. And I knew as a plumber, there was one little valve in the boiler room, a little half-inch valve, that if we closed it, all of the chaos and stuff would subside until we got there. And trying to explain to this superintendent whenever the call came in, where this valve was so frustrating. And that was literally what got me down. I remember taking an electronic valve to a friend of mine in the technology space and saying, "How do I control this thing online, remotely, whatever?" And the rest is history. So definitely feel that
Okay. Definitely, we got to get that water off as quickly as we can to reduce that size of the loss.
for sure.
Um, Here's the part I think is often underestimated. A water loss is never a maintenance issue only. It affects three different groups all at once. It impacts the residents. What started as a leaking pipe can quickly turn into weeks of disruption. Units may need to be dried out with fans, dehumidifiers placed in the units, running around the clock, making noise. Uh, Flooring and drywall may need to be ripped out and replaced. And in some cases, residents can't live in their units while these repairs are being completed. If water is coming from above or pooling inside the units, their personal belongings like furniture, rugs, clothing, their electronics can be damaged or ruined. And for the residents involved, it's not property damage only, it's a disruption of their regular daily life in their home. So, as many as you know, residents rarely remember the pipe that failed. They remember the inconvenience of living through the process of getting their unit back together. Uh, Another story, one of the first buildings I managed, it had a rooftop pool. Can you imagine? It overflowed and the water made its way right into the board president's closet. You can imagine how upsetting that was for her. She came home expecting a normal evening, and instead found all of her clothes and belongings were soaked through and most of them ruined. It certainly was not the welcome home she was expecting. It's that kind of experience that sticks with those residents long after the water has gone. Next, it also impacts our operations of the building. When a significant water loss occurs, the property management team is suddenly no longer focused on the work that they had planned for that day. Instead, they're managing an emergency response, coordinating restoration vendors, communicating with the residents, working with insurance adjusters, arranging access in and out of the building and the units, and keeping everyone informed as the repairs move forward through the process. And unlike many emergencies, waters don't end in a day or two. The cleanup may begin immediately, but it takes weeks, sometimes months, to fully dry, repair, and restore everything that was affected. Water damage has an unfortunate habit of staying on your to-do list long after it's gone. Finally, we have the financial impact. Water losses carry a cost for every loss. There's the immediate response of emergency uh, services to repair and dry out the units. The impact often extends well beyond that single event. Water losses contribute to higher insurance premiums, increased deductibles, and fewer carrier options at the renewal time. The boards and communities already facing a challenging insurance market, each claim adds pressure to an area that's already under strain. And unlike many operating expenses, these costs don't just affect that year's budget. The financial impact follows a community for years through its claim history, insurance renewal, and long-term risk profile until that claim is cleared off your loss history. Uh, Water has a way of turning a maintenance issue certainly into a financial issue very quickly.
Yeah, and I will add, I'm sure everybody joining today is obviously thinking about floods and burst pipes and drains overflowing. There's another impact to budgets that can easily come up, and we'll talk about it in more detail, but it's the water bills. And we often discuss water usage and consumption with buildings, particularly ones that are not metered, but even common elements running toilets, irrigation lines broken below grade can very quickly rack up quite a water bill. And you won't see that for 2, 3, 4 months down the line because a lot of the bills are done quarterly. And so that's something to also be mindful of, is not just water damage, but water waste.
That's great. Multi-purpose. We like that. Um, Over the years, I've worked with buildings of every size, shape, and configuration, and I can say I haven't encountered a stacked residential building that hasn't experienced some sort of water damage. That's why I believe every community should be evaluating some form of detection technology as part of its risk management strategy. It's no longer a luxury or nice to have. It's become an essential tool. The faster that leak is identified and the flow of water is stopped, the smaller the impact will be on the residents' operations and the association's budget. And that's especially important today because the technology has evolved significantly from years ago when I saw one installed. I'm very impressed. These systems, they're more reliable, more sophisticated, and more practical to implement than many people realize. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Adam. He's going to give us an inside look at Eddy Solution Systems, how it's deployed in residential communities, how it helps identify and stop leaks before they become major losses. And I'll talk about some of the additional benefits he mentioned communities are seeing beyond just water damage prevention.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Josh. I think a really good introduction to the problem that I'm sure most of the attendees, like you said, have faced in the past. So, My objective today is not to really speak so much to our products. That's kind of easy for me to do. I want to really provide you guys value when you're assessing, your issues, your goals with technology. And so my focus today is more about how does a system even understand when there's a problem? And there's sort of two pillars there. But then more importantly, how could you start thinking about applying this to your building? What we always come in with and want to emphasize is this is very modular. There's obviously going to be budget constraints. There's ways to, move from capital to an ongoing, to do small deployments and then roll out more equipment over time. So I'll start on the technology. We'll kind of go high level and go deeper and deeper into details. But what you ideally want with any technology that's managing water is for it to have all, features available to it. In other words, you want smart meters that can understand flow data. You want smart valves that give you control either over the entire building, parts of the building, or individual areas. And then you want some sort of endpoint, like a detection sensor that could be for temperature, for humidity, the presence of water, pressure, etc. Now, all of these endpoints, and I'll speak to each of our particular products specifically, but these all communicate wirelessly. And to Josh's point, that's what's really changed from, say, 30 years ago to today. I literally just got off a call at 10 a.m. this morning with a university in the US, and they were describing a leak detection system they had that was part of their building automation system, or what we'd say is BAS. Now, I know that that system is not really designed to do that. It's designed to manage the air handler units and temperatures and all that kind of stuff. And so what I've seen is that that old kind of antiquated technology is very expensive and it's not really geared toward control. So while they have sensors, there's no metering, there's no control. And so what the wireless technology, much like every technology, right? Computers used to be 5 grand and weren't very powerful. And today you have a supercomputer in your pocket. So we've leveraged a lot of those advances in technology, like long battery life, very strong wireless signal in concrete environments. And so all of these endpoints will use what's called LoRaWAN. It's a universally adopted wireless communication for high-rise buildings, commercial buildings. It's like saying Bluetooth, but it's a specific protocol. And so those will communicate wirelessly to gateways. To give you a sense, 20-story building, you'll probably have a gateway every few floors stacked vertically, and we'll take a closer look at that. But that's what allows us to get to the outside world and start doing things like text messages, emails, initiating automation to shut stuff by itself, to give you reporting, to collect data. And so all of this infrastructure has made it really easy to deploy in a retrofit, because I know there was a lot of limitations there back in the day. A lot of this would only really be implemented in a new construction environment, or if there was a major project going on. But this is
Adam, does
basically
that
the standard.
LoRaWAN use any of the building's utilities at all?
No, it's a good question. So the gateway, we have two types. One is cellular and one is Ethernet. Many of the buildings that we deploy do not rely on building Wi-Fi. I know cell reception can be poor in tall buildings. Wi-Fi, tends to drop off. I'm sure we've all experienced that in our own home. And so between LoRa going from the devices to the gateway and then cellular or a hard line, Rogers or Bell connection, gets us to the outside world, and it's very robust in that regard.
It's-
So a little deeper now, and I mentioned at the top there, two ways that any system can understand if there's a problem. And these are really the fundamentals of any leak detection or water management platform. So one of them is quite simple to understand, and I'll still go through it in detail, but it's sensor detection. In other words, a device placed on a floor, and if water sprays out of the pipe or a drain overflows and it comes into contact with the sensor, it'll understand that it's wet and it's going to send the alarm and trigger, text, emails, and phone calls. Flow monitoring is a little bit of a different animal in that, unlike a smoke detector that's placed in a room, no smoke is normal. In our world, water usage is normal. And so we have to try and distinguish between what's normal and what's not. And then, trigger alarms and automation and shut off. And so the devices themselves need to be able to do really two things: understand flow rate, like instantaneous flow rate, but also have, 30 days of history behind it so that it can start to create a map of volume over time. And the idea here, in short, is if there's a high amount of volume over a short period of time, or the inverse, a low amount of volume but running on for several hours, and it hasn't seen that in the last 30 days, that's something abnormal. And so those would be the two ways to understand when there's a problem in a building. And so going into each one more specifically, so hypothetically, you have a rooftop mechanical room, you got some boilers and storage tanks and other equipment. The most, simple deployment of a water sensor is to place them near those fixtures, appliances. You can place these near pipes and toilets and sinks and all that kind of stuff. And the idea here, again, is simple. If a pipe were to burst, that water starts to spill, pool horizontally, comes into contact with the sensor. The sensor now wakes up from its sleep state, understands that it's wet, and it sends a message to the gateway nearby, which then triggers instantaneous text and email, followed up in our case with a 24/7 call center. And a lot of our clients really depend on that. It's pretty easy to miss text and emails, especially at 2 in the morning. And so when we're provided a call tree by our client, which is usually different during the day and different at night, for example, at 2 a.m., we're probably calling the concierge saying, hey, the sensor in unit 304 in the living room and the fan coil has detected water. Let us know if you want us to shut any water off, if applicable, if you've applied those valves. But it really triggers somebody to go and review and investigate. And then to Josh's point earlier, the goal always is to mitigate the outcome, mitigate the severity, which is I need to close water right away. Maybe we need to get some towels down, call a restoration company. The quicker you can get to the point of breach, the less of an impact you'll have. And so I use the line a lot, you're going to have leaks. Leaks are inevitable, but what we're trying to do is take, a mop and towel situation. We don't want to see 30 units displaced. It could be a little bit of paint touch up and a lot more manageable.
Yeah, you
Um,
can get someone up there before it just flows down to the unit below, right?
Yes, because we all know water goes down and fairly quickly. So now I mentioned these sensors are 3 in 1 in our case. So they're also doing temperature and humidity. Again, same example. This happens, of course, in the winter where maybe there's a fresh air grill that's open and has a draft, or I've seen scenarios in construction where a contractor leaves the balcony door open. And so the moment the temperature drops, again, the sensor will see based on the threshold settings and again trigger text, email, and phone calls. So the sensors, again, are very binary. Whether you're doing temperature, humidity, the presence of water, it's basically a one or a zero. I'm wet or I'm not, and it's sending those alarms. The benefit with the sensors, they're fully wireless, and so it's very easy to deploy widespread across the building, however it allows. Now, the whoops meters are a little bit more complex. Now we have two products, but it's on the essence of measuring flow and instantaneous flow rate. So imagine our two products. We have the Eddy IQ, which is used for smaller pipe diameters. You would see these used as submeters at the suite level. You might see this on an irrigation system, on a water feature, smaller pipe sizes. And it's reading flow and it has the built-in valve. You can also do it with what's called the Eddy Link, connected to third-party valves and meters, so you're getting the same outcome, but with a product that can adapt to larger pipe sizes. Now, the way this works high level, as I've kind of mentioned, so it's an ultrasonic flow meter, whether it's the third party or the IQ type meter. It's communicating wirelessly with LoRaWAN. on board the device, it has that machine learning. So it's constantly retaining the last 30 days of usage to adjust the thresholds. And then, of course, with the IQ, it has the built-in valve. Now, the way that this will work, and it self learns, right? So it's when you deploy it on day one, over the course of time, it just gets better because it has more data to refer to. But generally speaking, throughout the day, whether it's an office building or a residential unit, it's expected to see, usage during the day. Someone flushes a toilet, you take a shower, you do the dishes. There's all kinds of normal usage. You'll still hit zero multiple times, like zero flow multiple times throughout the day. So the meter uses those as sort of checkpoints. I'm not seeing continuous flow. I'm not seeing a toilet flapper running. I'm not seeing an underground irrigation leak that's kind of just running onwards. Now, typically, sensitivity increases in the evenings and overnights. But anytime during the day, if it's seeing what we would refer to as continuous flow, so imagine like a baseline of, let's say, zero point 0.3 liters per minute. It never stops. You go zero point 0.3, zero point 0.3, maybe up to 5 because you ran the kitchen and back to zero point 0.3. That's clearly some sort of drippy fixture, a pinhole, something that's going on. In our case, it would see it. It needs to go on for a certain amount of time, and then it would trigger the text, email, and phone call. Now, optionally, it can also automatically shut down. So those are the type of conditions. We call them continuous flow or extreme flow. The difference with extreme flow, now imagine, all night it's 0.0000, and then all of a sudden there's a spike of 30 liters and it's never seen that in the past 20 days. It doesn't need as much time to make a decision whether this is regular or not. Again, based on just the sudden flow of water, the history that it has. And so that would trigger what we call an extreme flow condition, and again, optionally automatically close the valve. So important in a platform, as I've kind of touched on, is that you have not only the text and emails, but a live dashboard. You want to have control, you want to have insight, you want to have reporting. And to me, the most important pillar is always the 24/7 call center, because when we're working with our clients, they act as support to especially those less technical in the after hours. We can close the water for you. We can guide you to the location if they're not understanding the details of the messaging and what's popping up on the dashboard. I want to quickly play. It's a 60-second clip. This is a narrated but real call from an office building out in Winnipeg, and I'll give you a little bit of background. We deployed the equipment during construction for construction. It was then taken over by the management company as another part of the mechanical system. And so at that moment during the transition, they said, "Great, we want the alerts. Here's the call tree. Here's the people that are going to be getting texts and emails. We don't want you to automate anything." And to give you a sense, it was like a 12-story or 20-story office building. They had sensors in all the common bathrooms and mechanical rooms, and they had one main water shutoff valve that if you shut that, the whole building turns off. And so I'll play this clip here. Let me just make it full screen.
Critical.
And the audio.
Within seconds of detecting an anomaly, Eddy sends out email, SMS, and dashboard alerts. But we don't stop there. A trained 24/7 monitoring center is at the core of what we do to support our clients. When an alert is triggered, we follow up immediately.
Hi, this is Melanie calling from Eddy Solutions. We received an alert for the water sensors today located in the mechanical room on the 22nd floor, and it should be behind the air unit.
Okay, yeah, I'm just running up the stairs right now. I saw the email come through. Hi, it's calling from. I'm up here on 23. Is there any way that you can shut the water off? Yeah, or 22, I mean.
Okay, no problem. I can shut the water off for you. Do you happen to know what had caused the leak by any chance?
It's coming out of the backwash station.
Okay, so you should see a little bit of low pressure by now.
Okay. We've got less pressure now. You still have flow, it's just less now. Oh, the water stopped.
Okay, perfect.
Hang on 1 second. Yeah, the water stopped. Perfect. Thank you.
No problem. Have a great day.
At Eddy Solutions, we go beyond technology. With 24/7 monitoring and real-time assistance, we ensure that alert.
So I like playing the video because I think it really hits home. You can see in this very chaotic situation, they might have got the email. The phone call just helped move things along, give confidence that the person on site is going to the right location. They then call back very quickly. They now have our number. They have someone to work with, someone to speak with. It sounds like she's with someone. They see some sort of station, something is leaking, and they asked us to turn off the water because they might not remember their login credentials. They don't have the dashboard right then and there. And so that's the critical support, and why I always emphasize the importance of the call center.
Adam, that just
Uh,
it's so nice to have someone to help walk you through an emergency situation like that. Because if it's like we talked about, it happened during the middle of the night, sometimes we have concierge or front desk staff that they are filling in for someone, and to have someone pinpoint and tell you where to go and help you remain calm is just wonderful.
yeah, agreed. Very quickly, just to recap, basically, our products. So again, we have the wireless water sensors. So they're placed near fixtures, appliances, in walls, riser, chaseways, all that. If you're doing any sort of metering and or control, you can do it with the IQ for small pipes, 3/4, 1 inch. Again, usually at the unit level, if you have office buildings, at kitchenettes, things like that. And then if you're trying to adapt to larger pipe sizes, it really has no limit. We usually don't go beyond 6 or 8 inch for pipe sizes, but you would have the Eddy Link, which is connected to a third-party valve and meter, which accomplishes the same thing we discussed as far as flow and control. And then all of those communicate to the gateway. So the last piece here, and I'm hoping this starts to kind of get the brain going for you guys on how do you actually apply this. I could spend hours on this piece and happy to do any individual follow-up meetings, but I'll show you very basic. And I spoke to at the beginning of the call. This is modular. It can be adapted slowly in chunks over time. And that's usually how I start with it. Identify what is the problem you're trying to solve. As an example, standard building, you come to us and say, I need sensors in the common areas, and we don't have concierge. I'm only here, 3 days a week. I need some sort of way to turn off water remotely until my plumber gets their restoration, whatever the case is. Right away, I would say, great, understood. I'm gonna put a gateway somewhere on the first floor, P1 level, because your mechanical rooms are down there. You also have a rooftop mechanical room, so let's drop a gateway up there. I'm then going to recommend wireless water sensors. So maybe you need, based on the size of the mechanical room, 3, 4, 10 pieces, however big it is. So we'll place those around the floor. Down in the mechanical room, we would have a number of sensors, and maybe you have a water, room off to the side with a booster pump, or you have a mechanical room near the administration office, whatever the case is. These gateways can usually cover 1 story up and down. It's about a 300-foot bubble kind of radius around the gateway. So it doesn't mean that you need a gateway next to every room or anything like that. So there would be your sensor coverage. You now can get notified when there's a leak. But as I mentioned, maybe they also want some sort of panic button, emergency shutoff. So in that case, imagine you had, the water line comes in off the street. And let me just try and move the little zoom bars in my way here. Okay. So you have water coming in off the street. You have like your booster pump, your water entry room. You would already have a manual shut off there. And so what we would do is say you can either adapt an actuator to the existing valve, or we will supply you with a third party electric valve. That'll be connected to a link because it's usually a bigger pipe size, 4 inch, 6 inch, something like that. And then if, it's 2 a.m. and a pipe bursts in the mechanical room and the sensor is going off like crazy, and then the security guard's calling you and all that, either they can shut it off if they've been trained through their dashboard. Our call center, you can do it from your phone, but the idea would be you turn off that main water supply just to give you that time to get to the building, address the situation, whatever the case. Now, you can, of course, take control and sensors as far as you want, as far as would be applicable. Now, our methodology, when someone provides us their building drawings, is to look at what is the existing infrastructure, where are the zones or the risers or the existing valves, and how do we enhance them with, electricity? How do we make them actuated valves? You can go kind of crazy with the amount of control that you can apply to a building, but you try and find a balance of cost and impact. A lot of times in taller buildings, they have what's called zones, very frequent Canadian design. So every 10 stories is controlled from a specific location in the building. Roughly 10 stories, that's a zone. So if you had a 20-story building, you likely have a high zone and a low zone. And so instead of only having the main shutoff, which of course impacts everyone and everything, you could take it one step further and have zone control. So if you had, let's say, sensors down the riser, and again, riser bursts, sensor goes off, you can isolate just a portion of the building or a riser or a floor or a section, depending again how the plumbing is laid out, while not affecting other systems and other occupants. The last thing, again, you could take it a step even further, and we see this in certain circumstances where it allows, but every individual suite, I would say if they were built from the year 2000 onward, typically have one or two shutoffs that shut off the entire unit. The reason I say 2000 is the older buildings often have multiple risers and multiple shutoffs, like a set for the kitchen, set for the bathroom. So this might not apply to there, but in more modern buildings where you have sub-metering and all of that, I have seen people opt in for IQ meters, which have the shutoff at the unit level. And so imagine at the unit level, you say, I want to target high risk areas. For us, that means laundries, that means kitchens and dishwashers. Not so much bathrooms. I think a lot of people's mind often go to bathrooms, although you could put one behind the toilets. We're usually looking at the in-wall access points for risers, if maybe there was a fan coil near the outer wall, and then kitchens and laundries. Those are kind of our basic points. I have seen buildings with much larger units add sensors to fridges, and like I said, bathrooms. Those are generally the areas. Now, again, of course, if no one's home, the fridge explodes. The sensor would go off, you get your text and your email, and if applicable, and you have the automated shutoff, then that could close automatically, giving you time to go to the unit. Now, of course, the IQ is very nice to have, can be challenging to implement in a retrofit. So it all depends on the specific of the building. But we have seen people, usually with if your building has a hot water tank per unit and you have kind of more of a mechanical room arrangement, usually bigger suites, then it's quite easy to get the IQ implemented. I would say that the smaller like studios and you have, 600 units in your building, less likely that you could do the IQ, but the sensors, fully wireless, extremely easy to deploy pretty quickly. So that hopefully gives you a sense of how to deploy it. I know it's very surface level. The last thing I would just want to show is the gateways, because I think sometimes people don't understand how those get deployed at a very high level. You would, if you were trying to get sensors in every suite, one or two, kitchens, laundries, some in common areas, maybe a main shutoff, we would usually propagate a full building network. And what that means for us is we find a common vertical stack of electrical rooms or communication closets, and we just put gateways roughly every other floor, every third floor, depending on how wide the building is. And that gives us redundancy in coverage and also allows you to put, again, either one sensor or hundreds of sensors. There's no limitation on the gateway. So hopefully that gives you an understanding of how do you get the network infrastructure together to begin with. And yeah, with that, I will throw it back
Yeah.
to Josh.
Thanks, Adam. I'm recalling someone's water filter in their refrigerator exploding now that you mentioned that. And So I would certainly recommend putting them if there's ice maker lines under those.
Yeah,
Um,
that memory sounds like it was buried deep on purpose.
um, they actually waited until I drove all the way to the building from my house to get the water cut off. So if a
Yeah.
system was there and it cut it off, it would have made a huge difference. Um, so I appreciate that was a great overview of how the technology works and the role it plays in reducing water losses. Now I want to walk through what it looks like to get one of these systems up and running for your community. Um, this is the point where many boards and managers start thinking this sounds great, but it also sounds like a big project, a big undertaking. But the reality is that implementing a system like this is typically a straightforward, guided process that we can break down into three simple steps. Step one is discovery. We start by identifying where water risk lives within the building. We look at the claims history, the building layout, and known problem areas to understand where water losses have been happening and where they're most likely to occur again. Every property is different. For some communities, the concern may be mechanical rooms or common area equipment. Others, it may be the unit laundry rooms, aging plumbing, or specific unit stacks that Adam mentioned that are continuing to experiencing recurring leaks. The goal is to understand both the building's unique risk profile and where detection technology can have the best impact. Next, we evaluate. This is where we determine what solution is best for the building. There's no one size fits all. Every building's different. In some buildings, you can easily isolate and shut off water to a single unit, as Adam mentioned. In others, a leak in one residence may require shutting down water to a whole stack of units or a section of the building. That's why we take the time to compare options, understand the building's infrastructure. If we have the building plans, we look at those and we align the technology with the community specific needs. The right solution is the one that works for your building, not for someone else's.
Yeah, and I'd emphasize again the modularity and really understanding your building specifically. It's hard to answer the kind of broad questions of how much equipment should I put, where do I want control, but really easy to explore all of those options the moment we get drawings. We'll put together essentially an a la carte menu. It's very consistent. Multifamily are pretty much all the same as far as what systems do they want technology applied to. And then we usually go through all of those options with you. You could take it to the board, and we make it literally like a menu. If you don't care about this problem, you toggle that off, you toggle this on. We can really custom build a solution. Alternatively, we have some kind of out of the box pre-programmed solutions that are an easy way to get started. And I'll let Josh at near the end kind of discuss more about the programs that we've built for the first service communities. But we've done that to really make that process a little bit easier.
That's right, Adam. So once we've picked a solution, we've narrowed it down to, and we know how we want to get it implemented. We're here to help coordinate the rollout and support the community through the implementation. That includes planning the installation, communicating with the residents, and making sure that the building staff understands how the system works and what they need to do when alerts are received and what the residents need to do when they receive an alert. We want to make the process as smooth and straightforward as possible for everyone involved. The initial evaluation through the installation and adoption, we're here to help guide everyone through that step by step. You choose the path and we help bring it to life. Now let's talk a little bit more about why this matters from an insurance perspective. A protected building tells a very different story to an insurance carrier than an unprotected one. In today's insurance market, where underwriting scrutiny continues to increase and carrier appetite remains limited, proactive risk management really matters. When a community invests in a water detection technology like this, it shows that the board is actively working to reduce both the likelihood and the severity of future losses from occurring. We're not walking into a insurance renewal meeting simply asking for better terms. We've done something. We're showing the underwriters why your building is improved and represents a better risk for them. But the benefits go beyond insurance. Early detection, as we talked about, means fewer residents are replaced from their homes if something happens. There's less disruption to the community and faster recovery times when an incident does occur. Hopefully, we can just mop up that water rather than having to tear out damaged flooring. Instead of dealing with water that's been sitting there for hours or days, you have the opportunity to intervene the problem from the beginning early, and it's still manageable. A leak detected in minutes instead of hours of flowing water can really mean the difference between a repair bill that might be $1,000 compared to a claim that can be hundreds of thousands of dollars. Fewer affected units also means fewer personal policy claims filed by the residents, less pressure on the association's master policy, and ultimately a better claim history that supports the community at renewal instead of working against it. The best insurance claim that one can have is one they don't have to file. But when a loss can't be prevented entirely, the next best outcome is finding it early enough that it remains a small problem instead of becoming a big one. And perhaps most importantly, it gives you a proactive risk management strategy that we talked about that you can confidently stand behind. So that brings us to the end of our formal presentation. I want to thank Adam for sharing his expertise and walking us through the Eddy Solutions technology, and thank all of you for spending part of your day with us. My contact information is here, including my cell phone number and email address. It's up on the screen. You can also scan this QR code to visit our water detection solutions page. There you'll find additional resources and a way to request more information for a particular building. But never hesitate to reach out to me directly. I'm always happy to talk the problems through, to have a conversation, and help you determine what makes the most sense for your community. With that, Adam and I both are happy to answer any questions you might have about the technology or water losses in general. And if we don't have time to answer everyone's questions, we will certainly respond to those after the webinar. And as Andrea mentioned, we're also going to be sending a recording of this webinar out to everyone that registered after we're done.
Yes, I had the Q&A box here open, and for anyone else that hasn't had a chance yet, throw them in. We'll see how many we can get through. There's a one question in particular. It's two-parted that I would love to tackle. It's from Vito. Can you add any LoRaWAN sensor to your system or only ones from Eddy? And the reason I like that question is we have many deployments where Eddy's gateways are installed, but there are and our sensors, but there are other applications, other LoRa devices that we have nothing to do with. For example, occupancy or indoor air quality, and through discussions with multiple vendors, those LoRaWAN endpoints are bouncing off of the existing Eddy gateway and then into their interface. And so the short answer is yes, there is a large LoRaWAN alliance marketplace. And so we can implement either by putting up our network and allowing other vendors to bounce off, or I've even been implemented in buildings where it's someone else's converged network and only our endpoints because they want to have multiple vendors. So That is possible. The second part of the question was if the building has an existing system, would Eddy do the monitoring on their behalf? I'll say it's not the first time we've been asked, but I want to say the short answer is no. And the reason is it's hard for us to take on that liability of hardware and equipment that we don't know its condition, we don't know how it was installed or where it's placed. So hopefully that touches. I am familiar with the Link equipment, but that might be something where you want to replace over time.
Um, Adam, the next question Shelley has is, do the valves need to be exercised to confirm they operate and work properly?
Yeah, I wouldn't say they have to be, but it's highly recommended they are. And so what I mean is, when you build a building, or when a building is built, the engineer will have a very small paragraph that says you shall exercise all the valves in your building once a year to make sure they work. Nobody does it, and it's not practical to have somebody exercise. And for those that don't know what that means, it's go up to the valve and fully close it and fully open it, maybe once or twice, to just free up any rust or debris. What's nice when the valves are connected and smart and electric, and we do this service, which is once a year, we'll work with you or the plumber and we'll say, hey, these bank of valves, we're going to exercise them today, put up your notices, and then we can fully close and fully open. We get feedback signals from the valve, so we actually know its position. And if it failed to move one way or the other, we can service it proactively. The point being, it's functional when you need it most. Hopefully not, but when there's some sort of leak or service occurring. So, yeah, in short, recommended for sure.
Right. Um, I see Chad asks, how do we get started? Just Chad, just send me a message, and I'm happy to take a look at your building and get the process started and help get a quote together for you.
Yeah, I'll add Josh and his team have put together a really seamless and easy kind of intake form. He'll retrieve the information that we need behind the scenes, and he'll really coordinate everything and kind of handhold the beginning of those conversations. So
Yeah, I
it's
can
been
take most of
super
the weight hopefully off of you. I have access to the building info that's in Connect, and hopefully I can make it very easy for you and just ask you a few questions that we don't have access to.
yeah.
Um,
There's a few cost related questions that we could probably tackle, roughly three of them here in one shot. So the questions are essentially, at a unit level, for that type of solution, what would it cost? Assume a one bedroom, the cost in general. Is there an upfront or ongoing? Without sounding like we're dancing around the question, the problem with answering it is we don't know how much equipment you want to deploy. Again, you could put one sensor, 1,000, 10 valves, one valve. So there is a discussion that has to be had. Just telling you the cost of the individual bits and pieces won't really provide much value. But I will say a couple things. The general model for Eddy is there's equipment you purchase, valves, meters, sensors, hardware, all that. There is an implementation cost, whether it's just us managing someone else installing it or us turnkey doing the management and installation. We never include plumbing and electrical. We'll always work with your base building trades there. But when I say installation, it's placing the sensors, doing low voltage cable, all that. And then there's the third bucket, which is the ongoing monitoring and data cost. Now, I know that for services also put together a program with a specific amount of equipment and a specific cost. Again, I'd reach out to Josh and he can kind of walk you through. There's various options there. So hopefully that touched on some of the cost
yeah,
related
and
questions.
that might depend on the unit count in your building, so that's why we didn't want to just throw
Right.
out a number. But I can certainly help you with that. I've got their retail costs for each piece of equipment, which might help give us an idea if you just are questioning. And we have negotiated special rates for all of our first service properties with 20% off of any equipment that they install. Someone asked, Eddy is in Canada, Toronto. Yes, they are. They have several of our first service buildings with installations that we can get you references if you want to talk to those managers and ask them how they're doing. but I have heard nothing but wonderful feedback from those managers.
Yeah, and there's a question here. I just have a lengthy history with PEX piping. Tech was a big thing in Ontario or Canada. For those that know, it was a type of plastic pipe that was discontinued. There was a big class action lawsuit. There is currently a manufacturer with some plastic piping that's experiencing some leaks. Anyways, you can, again, it goes back to those fundamentals. You could either do it with flow metering, if it's applicable, if it's possible on that system, that line, wherever wherever that piping lies, or just simply with the wireless water sensors placed inside of riser chaseways, will help get you ahead of that situation much sooner. To Josh's points earlier, it's like a small pinhole in the bathroom wall. You're not going to see it till it's 2, 3 stories down and dripping from someone's bathroom ceiling. We'll see it in that instant on that floor while it's starting to puddle. So that'd be the general recommendation there.
I see a question about are there any discounts on insurance once we install these? And I don't want to tell you that there's going to be, bam, one big, discount on your condominium's master policy. We're certainly here to help have those discussions with your master policy carriers. I think the big takeaway on that is when you're going for your renewal, it gives you that tool to say, we've done this. We are expecting lower or no losses like we've been having. And it sets you up to make you more competitive, get a better carrier, or negotiate better rates with your current carrier. I've even seen some carriers that tell our associations, if you don't put one of these in, we are not going to renew you. So it
Yeah,
might help if you've had those losses.
I've
Um,
seen those two extremes as well, where it's, one is uninsurable and this helps you get there, but most are trying to be proactive. And to your point, insurance companies are clever. If they see a building that is proactively implementing technology, keep in mind for the audience today, water is a huge pain point for these insurance companies. So
and
there's a vested interest in both parties being proactive. And to your point, yeah, I've seen those that are doing their best, putting their best foot forward, have been getting benefits.
And on the personal policy side, though, we are seeing most of the personal policy carriers offer a direct discount. And what Eddy and companies that install these do is they produce a certificate that say this has been installed throughout the entire building. Just it's sort of like when you have a security alarm installed in your home, and you turn that over to your carrier, and they do typically offer an immediate direct discount off of your personal policy.
There's a couple I can quick fire here just to where 1 minute
I think we
left.
got 1 minute left.
No preferred plumbing company. We can work with your preferred. We like working with the base building plumber that's familiar with the building, but easy to train and enable anyone. To get the ball rolling, definitely reach out to Josh. Great resource for you guys. And then there's individual townhomes. While we won't do like single family, small residential deployments, if you're managing a complex of 10, 20, 50, 100 townhomes, we would certainly do that. We're always focused about deploying and servicing the condo corporation, not, individual residents of a building or a community.
But yes, I've seen townhomes with issues, and these are very helpful for those. And they're usually actually those easier ones to install shutoff valves because typically they have their own direct valve for each unit.
That's true. That's true.
Well, we appreciate you all being here, and like I said, we're going to be sure that this recording and answers to any questions that we might have missed is sent to everyone. And so with that, Adam, again, thank you, and hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Thanks, everyone.
This concludes our webinar. Thanks again and have a great day.